The morning of Melinda Fairley's wedding dawned grey and cold over Mayfair, as though London itself mourned what was to come. She stood before the gilt mirror in her bedchamber at Fairley House, her lady's maid fastening the endless row of pearl buttons down her spine. The wedding gown was exquisite, ivory silk embroidered with silver thread, the finest her father's considerable fortune could procure. It had been designed to make her a triumphant bride, a marchioness's daughter ascending to the pinnacle of society as a duchess. Instead, Melinda felt like a lamb being dressed for slaughter. "You look beautiful, my lady," whispered Anne, her maid, though her voice carried no conviction. The girl had heard the rumors too, everyone had. Melinda studied her reflection with detached precision. Black hair arranged in elaborate curls, dark brown eyes that appeared almost hollow in the morning light, skin pale as porcelain. She was considered handsome by society's standards, not a diamond of the first water perhaps, but certainly acceptable for a duke. Even a duke whom society whispered about in scandalized tones. The Beast of Stormholt. The nickname had followed Cassian Redwyke, Duke of Stormholt, for years. Some claimed he bore a hideous deformity, a face so terrible that he refused to let even his own servants look upon him directly. Others whispered darker things, that he had been cursed, that madness ran in his bloodline, that his first wife had died under mysterious circumstances. Though Melinda knew this last to be false, the Duke had never married. Until today. "Melinda?" Her mother's voice preceded her entrance into the chamber. The Marchioness of Fairley swept in, resplendent in burgundy silk, her expression a careful mask of maternal satisfaction. "It is time." "Yes, mother." Melinda's voice emerged steady, which surprised her. Inside, she felt as though she were fracturing into 1,000 pieces. The Marchioness approached, adjusting an imaginary flaw in Melinda's veil with hands that trembled slightly. For a moment, just a moment, something human flickered in her mother's eyes. Regret, perhaps, or pity. "You understand the importance of this match," her mother said quietly. "Your father's debts—" "I understand perfectly." Melinda cut her off, unable to bear hearing the justification again. She had heard it a dozen times since the betrothal was announced 6 weeks ago. The Marquis of Fairley had gambled away most of the family fortune. Creditors were circling like wolves. The Duke of Stormholt had offered an obscene amount of money for a bride, enough to save Fairley House, pay every debt and restore the family's standing. All it required was that Melinda marry a monster. "He may not be as terrible as they say," her mother offered weakly. Melinda said nothing. They both knew it was a lie told to ease conscience, not reality. The carriage ride to St. George's Church in Hanover Square passed in a blur. Her father sat across from her, avoiding her gaze, his florid face sheened with perspiration despite the morning chill. The Marquis had aged a decade in the past year, his dissipation written in the broken veins across his nose and the tremor in his hands. This was the man who had sold her to save himself. The church loomed before them, its Portland stone facade as cold and imposing as a mausoleum. The fashionable wedding guests would be few, Melinda knew. The Duke of Stormholt did not inspire the sort of celebratory attendance that other ducal weddings commanded. Most of the ton would stay away, either from superstitious fear or calculated social distancing from a man they deemed unsuitable company. Those who came would do so out of morbid curiosity, eager to see the bride sacrificed to the beast. Inside, the church was indeed sparsely attended. Melinda recognized a few faces as she processed down the aisle on her father's arm. The Countess of Pemberton, who collected gossip like other women collected porcelain, Lord Ashworth, who never missed an opportunity to witness another's misfortune, the Dowager Duchess of Hartwell, whose presence lent the proceedings a veneer of respectability. And there at the altar stood her bridegroom. Even from a distance, the Duke of Stormholt cut an imposing figure. He was tall, uncommonly so, with broad shoulders that filled out his dark blue superfine coat to perfection. His buckskin breeches and polished Hessian boots were impeccable, but it was what adorned his head that drew every eye in the church. A top hat with an unusually wide brim angled low, casting his face into complete shadow. Melinda's heart hammered against her ribs as she drew closer. Her hands, hidden within her silk gloves, had gone numb. She tried to glimpse something, anything of the face beneath that hat, but the shadow was absolute. She could make out only the strong line of his jaw, dark with what appeared to be several days' beard growth. The vicar began the ceremony, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Melinda heard the words as though from a great distance, her entire being focused on the man beside her. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back. When required to speak, his voice emerged low and rough, as though little used. "I, Cassian Redwyke, take thee, Melinda, fairly." His voice carried the cultured accent of the aristocracy, but there was something else beneath it, something dark and wounded. The sound sent an involuntary shiver down Melinda's spine. When it came time for her vows, she forced her voice to remain steady. "I, Melinda Fairley, take thee, Cassian Redwyke." The words felt like a noose tightening around her throat. The vicar pronounced them man and wife. The Duke did not attempt to kiss his bride, a breach of tradition that sent whispers rippling through the assembled guests. Instead, he merely inclined his head slightly and offered his arm. Melinda placed her trembling hand upon it, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath the fine wool. Whatever he was corporeal, real, her husband. They walked back down the aisle together, and Melinda kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, unwilling to meet the pitying or gleeful stares of the guests. Outside, a ducal carriage waited, black and imposing, with the Stormholt coat of arms emblazoned on the door, a silver wolf's head on a field of midnight blue. The Duke handed her into the carriage with surprising gentleness, then climbed in himself. The door shut with a definitive click, sealing them together in the intimate space. The carriage lurched into motion, carrying them away from St. George's, away from the life Melinda had known, toward whatever fate awaited her at Stormholt House. For several minutes, neither spoke. Melinda pressed herself against the far corner of the seat, her hands knotted in her lap. The Duke sat opposite her, still as a statue, his face still obscured by that damned hat. "You need not fear me," he said finally, his rough voice breaking the silence. Melinda's eyes snapped to where his face would be, though she could see nothing. "I am not afraid," she lied. A sound that might have been a bitter laugh emerged from beneath the hat. "You are a poor liar, Your Grace. Your Grace." The title that was now hers, Duchess of Stormholt. It should have thrilled her. Instead, it felt like chains. "Why do you hide your face?" The question escaped before Melinda could stop it, bold and foolish. The Duke's hands, which had been resting on his knees, clenched into fists. "You will see soon enough," he said coldly. "And then you will understand why I prefer the shadows." The carriage fell silent again, the only sounds the clatter of hooves on cobblestones and the distant calls of street vendors. Melinda stared out the window, watching London pass by, the elegant townhouses of Mayfair giving way to the broader streets near Hyde Park. Stormholt House stood on the corner of Park Lane, overlooking the park itself. It was a magnificent structure of pale stone, 4 stories high with a columned entrance and dozens of gleaming windows. A house that proclaimed power and ancient lineage. A house that felt like a prison as the carriage stopped before its doors. Servants materialized to assist them, footmen in the Stormholt livery of midnight blue and silver, a stern-faced butler, who Melinda would later learn was called Thornton. None of them looked directly at the Duke. Their gazes slid away from him as though repelled by some invisible force, focusing instead on Melinda with varying degrees of sympathy and curiosity. "Welcome to Stormholt House, Your Grace," Thornton intoned, bowing to Melinda. To the Duke he merely inclined his head slightly, keeping his eyes downcast. The interior of Stormholt House was as magnificent as its exterior promised. Marble floors, soaring ceilings adorned with elaborate plasterwork, walls hung with priceless paintings and Flemish tapestries. Yet there was something oppressive about it, as though the weight of centuries pressed down upon the very air. "Mrs. Hartwell will show you to your chambers," the Duke said, gesturing to a middle-aged woman in a housekeeper's black bombazine. "You may rest and refresh yourself. Dinner will be served at 8 o'clock. He paused, then added in that same cold tone, "In the small dining room. We shall dine alone." Before Melinda could respond, he turned and strode away, disappearing down a corridor with swift, almost desperate movements, as though fleeing her presence. Mrs. Hartwell tisked softly, "Come, Your Grace, I'll see you settled." The Duchess's apartments were on the 2nd floor, connected to the Duke's chambers by a shared dressing room, a common enough arrangement in aristocratic marriages. The rooms were beautifully appointed with furniture in the latest Egyptian style, walls papered in soft green silk, and a four-poster bed hung with curtains of ivory damask. His Grace ordered everything refurbished when the betrothal was announced, Mrs. Hartwell said, running an approving hand over the writing desk. Wanted everything perfect for you, he did. Melinda walked to the window which overlooked the park. In the fading afternoon light, she could see couples strolling along the paths, enjoying the mild weather. A world away from her, though separated by mere glass and stone. Mrs. Hartwell, she said quietly, not turning from the window, why does the Duke hide his face? The housekeeper was silent for so long that Melinda turned to look at her. The older woman's expression was troubled, torn between loyalty and compassion. It's not my place to say, Your Grace, she finally answered, but I will tell you this. His Grace is the finest man I've ever served. Whatever you've heard about him in London, it's naught but cruel gossip from cruel people who don't understand him. Is he disfigured? Melinda pressed. Mrs. Hartwell met her eyes directly. No, Your Grace, he is not. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, raising more questions than it answered. If the Duke bore no disfigurement, why the elaborate charade? Why the hat pulled low, the averted gazes, the self-imposed isolation? Then why— That is for His Grace to explain if he chooses. Mrs. Hartwell's tone left no room for further inquiry. Now, let me help you out of that gown. You'll want to rest before dinner. Melinda allowed herself to be undressed and put to bed like a child, though she knew sleep would be impossible. She lay beneath the fine linens, staring at the canopy above her, and wondered what the evening would bring, wondered when she would finally see the face of the man she had married, wondered if Mrs. Hartwell was telling the truth or offering kind lies to ease her mistress's fear. The clock on the mantel chimed 8 as Melinda descended the stairs, dressed now in a dinner gown of deep blue silk that her maid had unpacked from her trunks. Her hair had been redressed in a simpler style, and her heart hammered so violently she feared it might bruise her ribs. A footman led her through the maze of corridors to the small dining room, which proved to be small only by ducal standards. It could easily seat 20. But tonight, only 2 places had been set, one at the head of the table, one to its right. The Duke was already there, standing by the fireplace. He still wore the hat. Your Grace, Melinda said, curtsying. The formal address felt absurd, given they were now husband and wife, but she didn't know what else to say. Please, sit. He gestured to the chair. His movements were graceful, despite his size, controlled and precise. They sat, and servants appeared with the first course, a delicate soup fragrant with herbs. The Duke did not remove his hat, even to eat. Melinda watched in fascination as he maneuvered the spoon beneath the wide brim, managing the feat with practiced ease. How long had he been living this way? The house is beautiful, Melinda offered, attempting conversation. It has been in my family for 6 generations. His response was clipped, discouraging further pleasantries. They ate in oppressive silence. Melinda had no appetite, pushing the excellent food around her plate while her mind raced. This was to be her life, dining in silence with a man who wouldn't show his face, in a house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. When the servants cleared the final course, the Duke stood abruptly. It is time, he said. Melinda's blood turned to ice. Time for what? For you to see what you have married. His voice was harsh, bitter. You might as well know the worst of it now. He strode from the dining room, and after a moment of paralyzed hesitation, Melinda followed. He led her through the corridors to another wing of the house, finally stopping before a set of double doors. He pushed them open, revealing a library, a magnificent space lined floor to ceiling with books lit by dozens of candles that cast dancing shadows across the walls. The Duke walked to the center of the room and turned to face her. His hands, she noticed, were shaking. Close the door, he commanded. Melinda did as ordered, her own hands trembling. They were alone now, truly alone for the first time. Whatever was about to happen, there would be no witnesses. The Duke reached up and removed his hat. Melinda gasped, not in horror but in shock. The face revealed was not monstrous. It was not disfigured or diseased or bearing any mark of divine curse. It was, in fact, the most devastatingly handsome face she had ever beheld. Dark brown eyes, intense and pain-filled, stared at her from beneath strongly marked eyebrows. His hair was longer than the current fashion, touching his collar, as dark as her own. His features were sculpted in strong masculine lines, a straight nose, high cheekbones, a square jaw shadowed with dark stubble. A small scar marked his left eyebrow, but it only added character to a face that would have made classical sculptors weep with envy. "This is what I am," he said, his voice rough with something that sounded like anguish. "This is why they call me Beast." Melinda stared at him, completely bewildered. "I don't understand." "Don't you?" His laugh was bitter and broken. "Look at me. Look at me and tell me you don't see it." "I see a man," Melinda said slowly. "A handsome man. I see nothing that would warrant—" "My father was considered the handsomest man of his generation," the Duke interrupted harshly. "Women wrote poems about his beauty. My mother was a renowned beauty herself. I inherited their looks and it destroyed everything." He turned away from her, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "Do you know what it is to be prized solely for your appearance? To have people see nothing of your mind, your character, your soul, only a pleasant arrangement of features?" Melinda remained silent, sensing he needed to speak, to purge whatever poison had festered inside him. "From the moment I entered society, I was pursued," he continued, his voice thick with old pain. "Not for my title, though that was certainly attractive enough, not for my fortune, though it is considerable, but for my face. Women wanted to possess it. Men wanted to be seen with me, as though my looks might somehow transfer to them. I was an object, a prize, a trophy to be won and displayed." He turned back to face her, and in his dark eyes she saw years of accumulated wounds. "My own mother cared more for my appearance than my welfare. She would parade me before her friends like a trained animal. 'Isn't he beautiful?' she would say. 'Isn't he perfect?' I was never Cassian to her. I was simply my beautiful son." "That sounds terrible," Melinda whispered. "Terrible." He laughed again, that broken sound that made her chest ache. It was suffocating. "By the time I reached 21, I could not attend a ball without being mobbed by predatory women who cared nothing for who I was, only what I looked like. I had suitors, men seeking my sister's hand, who spent more time staring at me than at her. My father's business associates tried to use friendship with me to advance their own social standing." He moved to the window, staring out into the darkness. "And then there was Charlotte." "Charlotte?" "Lady Charlotte Ashford. We were betrothed when I was 23. I thought—" He paused, his shoulders tensing. "I thought she was different. She spoke to me of books, of ideas. She seemed to see beyond the surface. I loved her." Melinda waited, sensing the darkness to come. "On our wedding day, 3 hours before the ceremony, I overheard her speaking with her sister." His voice had gone flat, emotionless. She was boasting about how she would be the envy of every woman in London, married to the most beautiful man in England. Her sister asked if she loved me. Charlotte laughed and said, "Love? Who cares about love when you can wake every morning to a face like a fallen angel?" "Heavens," Melinda breathed. "I called off the wedding," the Duke said. "The scandal was enormous. Charlotte's family threatened to sue for breach of contract. I paid them off handsomely and retreated here. I stopped going to society functions. I started wearing the hat. And when I did venture out, I spread my own rumors, let them think me deformed, cursed, monstrous, better to be feared as a beast than desired as a beautiful object." He finally turned back to face her, and in his eyes was a terrible vulnerability. "And now you know the truth, Your Grace. You married me expecting a monster, and found instead this. A man so pathetically wounded by his own vanity that he hides from the world like a coward." Melinda crossed the room slowly, her mind reeling with everything he had revealed. She stopped before him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to smell the subtle scent of sandalwood that clung to him. "You're not a coward," she said firmly. "And it wasn't vanity. It was self-preservation." He flinched as though she had struck him. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." She surprised herself with the fierceness in her voice. "You were treated as an object your entire life, used and discarded based solely on your appearance. What Charlotte did was cruel and unforgivable. You had every right to protect yourself. By hiding?" His voice was raw. "By letting the world call me beast. By choosing how you wished to be seen," Melinda corrected. "By refusing to let them reduce you to nothing more than a handsome face." They stood in silence for a long moment, something fragile and unexpected building in the air between them. "Why did you agree to marry me?" the Duke asked finally. The real reason. Melinda could have lied, could have cited duty or ambition, but his honesty deserved equal honesty in return. "My father's debts," she said simply. "He gambled away our fortune. We were on the brink of ruin. Your marriage settlement saved my family." "So we are both victims of commerce," he said with a twisted smile. "You were sold to save your family's name. I bought a bride because I knew no woman would marry the beast voluntarily." "That's not—" Melinda started to protest, but he held up a hand. "It's the truth. I won't insult either of us by pretending otherwise." He moved past her, heading toward the door. "Your rooms are connected to mine. I will not force my company upon you. You are my Duchess and will want for nothing, but I will not burden you with expectations of affection." "Wait." Melinda's voice stopped him at the doorway. "You said I was your Duchess." "You are. Then I have a request." She drew herself up, channeling every ounce of her mother's aristocratic bearing. "Remove the hat. If we are to be married, truly married, I would like to see my husband's face." The Duke stared at her for a long moment, something like hope flickering in his dark eyes. Then he set the hat on a nearby table and stood before her, fully revealed. "As you wish," he said quietly. "Your Grace." And Melinda looked upon her husband, really looked upon him, and thought that perhaps, just perhaps, this marriage might be something other than the prison sentence she had feared. The first weeks of marriage were strange and tentative, a careful dance between two wounded souls learning to coexist. True to his word, the Duke, Cassian as he had finally asked her to call him in private, did not force his presence upon her. He worked in his study during the day, managing his vast estates and business interests. They dined together each evening in the small dining room, conversations gradually becoming less stilted as they discovered common interests in literature and music. And he no longer wore the hat, at least not inside Stormholt House. When he did venture out, which was rarely, he would don the wide-brimmed hat and resume his beast persona. Melinda found this both tragic and infuriating, but she said nothing. She was learning that Cassian's wounds ran deeper than she had initially understood, and they would not heal quickly or easily. What surprised her most was how gentle he was. He would hold doors for her, ensure her favorite tea was always stocked, and ask about her comfort with genuine concern. The servants adored him, she noticed. They might not look him in the eye, but they moved with efficiency, born of respect, not fear. The physical aspect of their marriage, however, remained untouched. They had been married nearly a month, and Cassian had never so much as kissed her. Their bedrooms remained separate, the connecting dressing room a neutral territory that neither violated. Melinda told herself she was relieved. She had entered this marriage expecting nothing of affection or passion. The fact that Cassian was kind and left her in peace should have been enough. So why did she find herself listening for his footsteps at night? Why did her eyes linger on the strong lines of his face during dinner? Why did her pulse quicken when their hands accidentally touched? She was falling in love with the beast of Stormholt, and the realization terrified her. It was 6 weeks into their marriage when everything changed. Melinda had spent the afternoon in the conservatory, reading one of Cassian's botanical texts. He had an impressive collection of rare plants and had seemed pleased when she expressed interest. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice the time until a footman appeared to inform her that dinner would be delayed. His Grace had been detained. Curious and slightly concerned, Melinda made her way toward Cassian's study. As she approached, she heard voices, Cassian's deep tones and another man's higher, more nasal voice. "Absolutely not," Cassian was saying, his voice hard. "I won't hear another word about it." "But your Grace must consider," the other man began. "I have considered, and my answer is final. My Duchess will attend with me, and that is the end of it." Melinda paused outside the door, uncertain whether to interrupt. "But the scandal, your Grace. You haven't attended a major social function in years. And to bring her Grace when the talk about your condition is still so fresh." "The talk about my condition?" Cassian's voice had gone dangerously soft. "You mean the lies and gossip spread by small-minded fools who have nothing better to do than speculate about their betters?" "I meant no offense, your Grace," the other man stammered. "I only thought you thought wrong. The Duchess and I will attend the Hartwell ball next week, and there's an end to it. You may go." Melinda heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly stepped back. A thin man in a secretary's sober black coat emerged, looking flustered. He nodded to her distractedly and hurried away. Taking a breath, Melinda knocked on the study door. "Enter." Cassian sat behind his massive desk, papers spread before him, but his attention was on her the moment she stepped inside. As always, the sight of him made her breath catch slightly. How had she ever thought him beastly? "Melinda," he rose immediately. "Is something amiss?" "I heard voices," she admitted. "I apologize for eavesdropping, but I couldn't help overhearing something about a ball." Cassian's expression darkened. "The Dowager Duchess of Hartwell is hosting a ball next week. She's my godmother, and has been insisting I attend. I thought—" He paused, seeming uncertain. "I thought perhaps you might wish to go, to be properly presented as my Duchess." Melinda's heart leaped at the thought, not of the ball itself, but of appearing in society with Cassian, of showing London that their Duchess was proud of her Duke. "I would like that very much," she said. "You needn't agree simply to be obliging," Cassian said quickly. "I know society has not been kind in their speculation about our marriage. The stares and whispers might be unpleasant." "Let them stare," Melinda said firmly. "Let them whisper. I am your wife and I have no shame in that." Something bright and fierce blazed in Cassian's eyes. He crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands in his, the first time he had voluntarily touched her beyond the most formal courtesies. "You are extraordinary," he said roughly. "I don't deserve you." "That's absurd," Melinda whispered, acutely aware of the warmth of his hands, the nearness of him. "If anything, I don't deserve your kindness. You could have been cruel. You could have treated me as an obligation. Instead, you've been nothing but gentle." "Melinda," his voice was strained, his eyes searching hers. "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm falling in love with you." The confession seemed torn from him. "I tried not to. I swore I wouldn't burden you with expectations. But every day watching you move through my home, seeing your kindness to the servants, listening to your clever observations about the books you read, I'm losing the battle." Melinda's heart hammered so hard she thought it might shatter her ribs. "That's not a burden," she whispered, "isn't it? You married me out of necessity. You deserve more than a husband who hides from the world, who carries wounds he cannot seem to heal." "Then let me help you heal them," Melinda said, squeezing his hands. "Cassian, I'm falling in love with you too. I think I have been since that first night, when you trusted me enough to remove the hat, when you showed me your true face." For a long moment, Cassian simply stared at her, as though unable to believe what he was hearing. Then, with a sound that was half groan, half laugh, he pulled her into his arms. "Melinda," he breathed against her hair. "My Duchess, my salvation." She tilted her face up to his, and finally, he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and hungry, the kiss of a man who had denied himself too long. Melinda responded with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his coat, her body pressing against his solid warmth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. "Come to my bed tonight," he said, his voice rough with desire. "Not out of duty, but because you want to." "Yes," Melinda whispered. "Yes." That night marked the true beginning of their marriage. Cassian was a passionate and surprisingly tender lover, worshipping her body with a reverence that made tears prick her eyes. He whispered her name like a prayer, his hands and mouth learning every inch of her, until she was trembling and gasping beneath him. And afterwards, as they lay tangled in his sheets, he held her close and whispered secrets into the darkness. About his childhood, about the crushing weight of expectations, about the loneliness that had defined most of his adult life. Melinda listened and shared her own stories, about growing up in a house where appearance mattered more than substance, where her father's gambling had cast an ever-present shadow, where she had learned to make herself small and agreeable to avoid conflict. "We were both prisoners," Cassian murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Both trapped by circumstances we didn't create. But we're free now," Melinda replied. "Together we're free." In the days that followed, Melinda saw a transformation in her husband. He smiled more readily. He laughed at her teasing remarks. He took her on long walks through Hyde Park, still wearing the hat, but with less of the desperate need to hide. And at night, They came together in passion and tenderness, learning each other's bodies and hearts with equal dedication. The night of the Hartwell ball arrived with startling speed. Melinda dressed in her finest gown, pale gold silk that made her dark hair and eyes dramatic by contrast. Cassian appeared in her dressing room as her maid finished arranging her coiffure, looking devastatingly handsome in black evening clothes. "You look magnificent," he said, his eyes dark with appreciation. "As do you," Melinda replied. Then, gently, she reached for the hat he carried. "Must you wear it?" Cassian's jaw tightened. "The Tun expects the beast. If I appear without it—" "If you appear without it, they'll see what I see," Melinda interrupted. "A handsome, intelligent, worthy duke, my husband. They'll gossip. They'll gossip regardless. But if we face them together, without shame or fear, we take away their power." She cupped his face in her hands. "You've been hiding for so long, Cassian. Isn't it time to stop?" For a long moment, he wrestled with himself. Then, slowly, he set the hat aside. "Very well," he said quietly. "For you, I'll try." The Hartwell Ball was the social event of the season, the ballroom glittering with hundreds of candles and filled with the cream of London society. When the butler announced, "His Grace, the Duke of Stormholt, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Stormholt," every head turned. The collective gasp was audible. Melinda felt Cassian tense beside her as hundreds of eyes fixed upon them. She squeezed his arm gently, silently reminding him she was there. They descended the stairs together, and the whispers began immediately, a susurrus of shock and speculation that followed them across the ballroom floor. "Not disfigured at all. Why did he hide? Most handsome man I've ever seen. Poor Duchess, trapped with the beast." That last comment, delivered in a carrying voice by a woman Melinda recognized as Lady Pemberton, made her blood boil. She turned, fixing the Countess with a cold stare. "I beg your pardon, Lady Pemberton, but I believe you were speaking about my husband." Lady Pemberton had the grace to flush. "You merely meant to spread vicious gossip about a man you don't know." Melinda's voice was pleasant but edged with steel. "How fortunate that I am here to correct your misconceptions. My husband is the finest man of my acquaintance, and I consider myself extraordinarily fortunate to be his wife. Should you have any further observations about the Duke of Stormholt, I suggest you direct them to me. I should be happy to educate you." Lady Pemberton stammered an apology and fled. Around them, Melinda could see other guests hastily turning away, their expressions ranging from embarrassed to impressed. Cassian looked down at her, something like awe in his eyes. "My fierce Duchess," he murmured. "Always," she replied. The Dowager Duchess of Hartwell, a formidable woman in purple silk and diamonds, approached them with a broad smile. "Cassian, my boy, it's about time you stopped this foolish hiding business. And your Grace," she turned to Melinda, "welcome to the family, properly this time. You're exactly what my stubborn godson needed." The evening that followed was not easy. There were stares and whispers, and several bold young ladies attempted to engage Cassian's attention with uncomfortable directness. But Melinda remained at his side, a steady presence, and gradually she felt him relax. They danced together, a waltz that left Melinda breathless and dizzy. In Cassian's arms, moving across the floor, she felt as though they were the only two people in the world. "Thank you," Cassian whispered as the music swelled, "for believing in me, for seeing past the fear." "Thank you for letting me in," Melinda replied, "for trusting me with your heart." It was nearly midnight when the trouble began. Melinda was standing near the refreshment table, fanning herself after the exertion of dancing, when she felt a presence at her elbow. She turned to find a woman she didn't recognize, young, perhaps 25, with auburn hair and striking green eyes, dressed in a gown of emerald silk that was just slightly too low-cut for propriety. "Your Grace," the woman said, curtsying, "we haven't been formally introduced. I am Lady Sylvia Ashford." Ashford. The name sent a chill down Melinda's spine. "Charlotte Ashford's sister." "Lady Sylvia," Melinda replied coolly, inclining her head the barest minimum required by courtesy. "I wanted to congratulate you on your marriage," Lady Sylvia continued, her smile not reaching her eyes. "How fortunate you are to have secured such an eligible husband. Though I confess I was surprised when I heard the beast had finally taken a bride." My husband is not a beast, Melinda said firmly. Surely you, of all people, know that. Lady Sylvia's smile sharpened. Oh, I know precisely what the Duke of Stormholt is. My sister knew as well. Such a pity things ended as they did between them. Your sister was cruel and mercenary, Melinda said bluntly, abandoning pretense. My husband had every right to end that betrothal. Did he? Lady Sylvia's eyes glittered with malice. Or was it simply that Charlotte saw through his facade, that she recognized his peculiarities for what they were? I don't know what you're implying, but I'm implying nothing, Your Grace. I'm simply warning you. Lady Sylvia leaned closer, lowering her voice to a confidential purr. You seem like a sensible woman. Surely you've wondered why a duke of such considerable fortune and standing would need to essentially purchase a bride. Why he hides from society. There are reasons, you know, dark reasons, that have nothing to do with vanity or wounded pride. Melinda's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. You're speaking nonsense. Am I? Then tell me, Your Grace, has your husband explained why his previous betrothal ended mere hours before the wedding? Has he told you what Charlotte discovered about him that made her flee in terror? Charlotte didn't flee. Cassian ended the engagement. Is that what he told you? Lady Sylvia laughed softly. How sweet. How naive. She straightened, her expression hardening. Mark my words, Your Grace. You've married a man with secrets, dark secrets, and when you discover the truth, as you inevitably will, you'll understand why society calls him beast. With that parting shot, Lady Sylvia melted back into the crowd, leaving Melinda shaking with anger and, she hated to admit, a small seed of doubt. She found Cassian near the card room, speaking with Lord Hartwell. The moment he saw her face, he excused himself and came to her side. What's wrong? He demanded, his hand going to her elbow. Nothing, Melinda lied. Then, seeing the concern in his eyes, she relented. I encountered Lady Sylvia Ashford. Cassian's expression went cold. What did she say to you? She tried to imply that there's some dark truth about you that I should be afraid of. Melinda gripped his arm. Cassian, what happened with Charlotte? The real story. Cassian's jaw worked. This is not the place for this conversation. Then let's leave. Melinda could see the strain in his face, the old wounds reopening. Please, I need to understand. They made their excuses to the Dowager Duchess and departed, the carriage ride home tense and silent. Once inside Stormholt House, Cassian led Melinda to the library, the same room where he had first revealed his face. Charlotte didn't discover anything, he said without preamble, pouring himself a brandy with shaking hands. There was no dark revelation, no terrible secret. The truth is exactly what I told you. I overheard her boasting about marrying me for my looks, and I ended the betrothal. Then why would Lady Sylvia suggest— Because the Ashfords have been spreading lies for years, Cassian interrupted harshly. They were humiliated by the broken engagement. I paid them a considerable settlement, but money couldn't restore their damaged pride. So they began whispering that I had been the one rejected, that Charlotte had discovered something so terrible she couldn't possibly marry me. That's monstrous. It's the ton. Cassian drank deeply. Reputation is everything, and truth is negotiable. By the time I realized what they were saying, it was too late. The rumors had taken root. I decided it was easier to let them believe I was a beast than to fight an unwinnable battle for my reputation. Melinda crossed to him, taking the glass from his hand and setting it aside. I believe you, she said firmly. Completely and without question. How can you be so certain? There was anguish in his voice. You barely know me. I know what matters. She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. I know you're kind to your servants. I know you're generous to your tenants. I know you read botanical texts and play the pianoforte when you think no one is listening. I know the way you make love to me, as though I'm precious and irreplaceable. That's the truth of who you are, Cassian, not the lies told by bitter, cruel people. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Stop saying that, Melinda replied fiercely. We deserve each other, we deserve happiness, and I won't let Lady Sylvia or anyone else poison what we've built. They held each other in the candle-lit library, drawing strength from their shared determination. But even as Melinda reassured her husband, she felt the first stirrings of unease. The Ashfords were clearly not finished with them, and society, she was learning, could be more vicious than any beast. The following weeks brought an unexpected development. London society, starved for novelty, became fascinated by the Duke and Duchess of Stormholt. Invitations poured into Stormholt House. Hostesses who had previously avoided the beast now clamoured for the handsome Duke and his elegant Duchess to grace their entertainments. Cassian was bewildered by the sudden attention. Melinda found it both amusing and slightly nauseating. "They're like vultures," she observed one morning over breakfast, sorting through another stack of gilt-edged cards. "2 months ago, they whispered about you as though you were Bluebeard himself. Now, they want you at their dinner tables." "Should we refuse?" Cassian asked, looking up from his newspaper. Melinda considered. Part of her wanted to reject every invitation, to punish the fickleness of the ton. But another part, the part that was learning to think strategically, recognized an opportunity. "No," she said slowly, "we should accept some of them. The more we appear in society as a united, content couple, the harder it becomes for people like the Ashfords to spread their poison." Cassian smiled at her over the rim of his coffee cup. "When did you become such a tactician?" "I learned from watching my mother navigate society's treacherous waters," Melinda replied. "Though I swore I'd never become like her, I must admit she taught me some useful skills." They began accepting select invitations: dinner parties, musicals, the occasional ball. Melinda made it her mission to be gracious to everyone, even those who had previously whispered about her husband. She watched as Cassian gradually relaxed in social settings, the old confidence returning, as he realized people were responding to him as a man, not as an object or a monster. But the Ashfords were not idle. Lady Sylvia Ashford seemed to appear everywhere Melinda went. At Lady Pemberton's dinner party, she managed to secure the seat next to Melinda and spent the entire meal making veiled comments about marriages of convenience and the secrets husbands keep. At the theatre, Melinda spotted Lady Sylvia in a box across from theirs, watching them with unnerving intensity. And then there was Charlotte herself. Melinda finally encountered the woman at a musicale hosted by the Countess of Pemberton. Charlotte Ashford, now Lady Charlotte Barrett, having married a baronet, was blonde and beautiful in the conventional sense, with porcelain skin and china blue eyes. She approached Melinda during the interval between performances, a false smile fixed on her face. "Your Grace," she said, curtsying, "how delightful to finally meet you. I've heard so much about the new Duchess of Stormholt." "Lady Charlotte," Melinda replied, matching her cool tone, "congratulations on your own marriage." "Thank you." Charlotte's smile didn't waver, but her eyes were cold. "Though I must confess, Baronet is somewhat less impressive than Duke. You're a fortunate woman." "I am," Melinda agreed pleasantly. "My husband is extraordinary." "Extraordinary," Charlotte repeated, as though tasting the word. "Yes, that's certainly one way to describe Cassian, though I might choose different words." "How interesting that you still call him by his Christian name," Melinda observed, "given that your engagement ended so long ago." Charlotte's smile tightened. "We were quite close once upon a time, before he showed his true nature." "And what nature would that be?" "A man who breaks promises, who casts aside those who love him when they become inconvenient." Charlotte leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Tell me, Your Grace, has he tired of you yet? Or are you still in that blissful period where you believe his pretty words and passionate embraces mean something?" Melinda felt her temper flare, but kept her voice even. "My marriage is none of your concern, isn't it? I tried to warn you, you know. Through my sister. But you didn't listen." Charlotte straightened, smoothing her skirts. "When it all falls apart, and it will, remember that I tried to help." She glided away, leaving Melinda furious and shaken. When Cassian found her a few minutes later, he took one look at her face and knew something had happened. "Charlotte," he guessed, "how did you know?" "Because you look the way I feel whenever I see her." He guided her to a relatively quiet corner. "What did she say?" Melinda related the conversation, watching Cassian's expression grow progressively darker. "This has to stop," he said when she finished. "They can whisper about me all they like, but I won't have them attacking you." "I can handle Charlotte and her sister," Melinda assured him. "They're bitter women trying to salvage their pride." "It's more than that." Cassian glanced around, ensuring no one was in earshot. "There's something I haven't told you. About why Charlotte's family hates me so much." "What?" After I broke the engagement, Charlotte's father, Lord Ashford, came to see me. He demanded I marry Charlotte anyway, said the family's reputation would be ruined otherwise. When I refused, he threatened to spread rumors about me. I thought he was bluffing. Cassian's jaw tightened. I was wrong. He spent the past 6 years systematically poisoning London society against me. But why? What does he gain? Revenge. I humiliated his daughter. He wants me to suffer for it. Cassian took her hands. And now you're caught in the crossfire. I'm sorry, Melinda. I should have told you all of this before we married. Would it have changed anything? Melinda asked. We both married out of necessity. Knowing about Lord Ashford wouldn't have altered that. Perhaps not. But you would have been prepared for their campaign against us. Then prepare me now, Melinda said firmly. Tell me everything, and then we'll decide how to fight back. The campaign of whispers escalated over the following weeks. Melinda began noticing subtle shifts in how certain members of society treated them, conversations that stopped when she entered a room, invitations that dried up from particular families, knowing looks exchanged behind fans. The Ashfords were working their poison with surgical precision. The breaking point came at the Pemberton ball, nearly 3 months into Melinda and Cassian's marriage. They arrived late, having been delayed by a problem with one of Cassian's tenant farms that required immediate attention. The ball was in full swing, the ballroom crowded with London's elite. Melinda was wearing a new gown of deep sapphire silk that made her dark eyes luminous, and she noticed multiple heads turning as they entered. But this time, the attention felt different, malicious. Something's wrong, Cassian murmured, his hand tightening on her elbow. I feel it too, Melinda replied. They made their way through the crowd, and Melinda became aware of the whispers following them like a dark wake. Can you believe it? Poor thing probably doesn't even know. Saw them together at the theatre last week. Absolutely shameless. Lady Pemberton approached, her expression dripping with false sympathy. Your Grace, she said to Melinda, might I have a word? In private? Every instinct screamed at Melinda to refuse, but she couldn't show fear. Of course. Lady Pemberton led her to a small withdrawing room off the ballroom. Several other ladies were already there, including, Melinda's heart sank, Lady Sylvia Ashford and Charlotte. We felt you should know, Lady Pemberton began without preamble, that there's been some disturbing talk. What sort of talk? Melinda kept her voice steady. About the Duke of Stormholt and Lady Amelia Thornwood. Lady Pemberton's eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. They were seen together at the theatre last week, in her private box, alone for quite some time. Melinda's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to show nothing. I see. Lady Amelia is well known for her, shall we say, flexibility in matters of fidelity, Charlotte added helpfully. And the Duke, well, everyone knows how beautiful he is, how susceptible he's always been to female attention. We thought you should know, Lady Sylvia said, her voice dripping false concern. Before the rumours spread further, a wife should be aware of her husband's indiscretions. Melinda looked at each of them in turn, these women who had gathered like carrion crows to pick apart her marriage. She thought of Cassian, of his gentleness and passion, of the way he looked at her as though she were precious beyond measure, and she knew with absolute certainty that it was a lie. How kind of you to concern yourselves with my marriage, Melinda said pleasantly. However, I'm afraid you've been misled. My husband was indeed at the theatre last week. We both were. He stepped into Lady Amelia's box briefly to discuss a charitable matter in which they're both involved. I was present for the entire conversation. It was a complete fabrication, but Melinda delivered it with perfect confidence. Lady Pemberton blinked. You were there? Of course. Did you think I would allow my husband to attend the theatre without me? Melinda smiled sweetly. How curious that whoever reported this to you failed to mention my presence. One might almost think they were deliberately trying to cause trouble. She let her gaze linger meaningfully on Charlotte and Lady Sylvia, who had both paled slightly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should return to my husband. He'll wonder where I've gone. Melinda moved toward the door, then paused. And ladies, in future, if you have concerns about my marriage, I suggest you bring them directly to me. I don't appreciate my husband's name being slandered in withdrawing rooms by gossips with too much time and too little integrity. She swept out before anyone could respond, her heart hammering, but her head held high. Cassian was waiting just outside the ballroom, his expression dark with concern. "What happened?" "We're leaving," Melinda said quietly. "Now," she explained in the carriage on the way home, watching Cassian's face grow progressively more furious. "Lady Amelia Thornwood," he exploded when she finished. "I've never exchanged more than basic pleasantries with the woman, and I certainly haven't been alone with her in a theatre box." "I know," Melinda said calmly. "It's an obvious lie. But that's not the point." "Then what is the point?" "The point is that the Ashfords are trying to destroy us. They're spreading lies designed to poison society against you and drive a wedge between us. And unless we find a way to stop them, they'll succeed." Cassian slumped against the carriage seat, running his hands through his hair. "I'm sorry," he said raggedly. "I brought this into your life. My past, my mistakes." "Stop." Melinda moved to sit beside him, taking his face in her hands. "Your past is not your fault. Charlotte's bitterness is not your fault. The Ashfords' vendetta is not your fault. You broke an engagement to a woman who didn't love you. That's not a crime. It is in society's eyes. Then society's eyes are blind." She kissed him, fierce and claiming, "You're my husband, I love you, and I will not let those vipers destroy what we've built." Cassian pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "What do we do?" "We fight back," Melinda said, "but not with whispers and lies. We fight with truth, with our love, with the undeniable proof that we are happy and united." "How?" "I don't know yet," Melinda admitted, "but we'll find a way, together." The solution came from an unexpected source, the Dowager Duchess of Hartwell. She called upon them 2 days after the Pemberton ball, sweeping into Stormholt House with her customary authority. Cassian and Melinda received her in the drawing room, both uncertain what to expect. "I've been hearing disturbing rumors," the Dowager announced without preamble, accepting a cup of tea, "about supposed indiscretions and theatre boxes and nonsense. I assume it's all lies." "Complete fabrications," Cassian confirmed. "The Ashfords are behind it." "Of course they are. That family has no honor." The Dowager sipped her tea thoughtfully. "I warned your father about encouraging that match with Charlotte, Cassian. The Ashfords have always been more concerned with appearance than character." "Can you help us?" Melinda asked. "Your opinion carries considerable weight in society." "My dear girl, I can do better than offer my opinion. I can give you a platform." The Dowager set down her teacup with a decisive click. "My annual summer ball is in 3 weeks. It's the event of the season. Everyone who matters will attend. I want you to host it with me." "Host it?" Cassian looked stunned. "As co-hosts, you'll stand in the receiving line, you'll open the dancing. You'll be seen by everyone as a united, devoted couple. It will give you visibility and credibility. And it will give me the opportunity to publicly endorse your marriage." "But won't that draw more attention to the rumors?" Melinda asked. "Of course it will. That's the point." The Dowager smiled wickedly. "You can't defeat gossip by hiding from it. You must confront it head-on. Show society that the Duke and Duchess of Stormholt are happy, devoted, and utterly unaffected by malicious lies. Force the Ashfords to either produce proof of their claims, which they cannot, or be revealed as the liars they are." Melinda and Cassian exchanged glances. It was a risk, but the Dowager was right. They couldn't keep defending themselves against whispers and innuendo. They needed to take control of the narrative. "We'll do it," Cassian said. "Thank you, Godmother." "Don't thank me yet. You'll have 3 weeks of absolute scrutiny. Every gesture, every glance between you will be analyzed. The Ashfords will be watching for any crack they can exploit." The Dowager stood, preparing to leave. "But if you can weather this storm, you'll come through stronger. The Ton respects strength and unity. Show them you have both." After she left, Melinda turned to Cassian. 3 weeks, she said. 3 weeks, he agreed. "Can we do this?" "We can do anything," Melinda said firmly, "as long as we're together." The 3 weeks that followed were among the most challenging of Melinda's life. She and Cassian appeared everywhere together, dinners, musicales, even a Venetian breakfast, that Melinda found tedious beyond words. They danced together, conversed together, and presented a united front to a society hungry for scandal. And through it all, they felt the Ashfords watching. Lady Sylvia was a constant presence, always nearby with a barbed comment or insinuating question. Charlotte appeared less frequently, but made her presence felt when she did, often engaging Cassian in conversation that grew uncomfortably personal. "She's trying to make you jealous," Cassian observed after one particularly tense encounter at a garden party. "She wants you to doubt me." "I know," Melinda replied, "and I won't give her the satisfaction." But in private, in the quiet hours of night when she lay in Cassian's arms, Melinda felt the strain. Not doubt in her husband, never that, but weariness from the constant performance, the endless vigilance required to navigate society's treacherous waters. "Sometimes I think we should just leave London," Cassian murmured one night, stroking her hair. "Retreat to one of the country estates. Let society gossip themselves hoarse." "We can't run," Melinda said, though the idea was tempting. "That's what they want, to drive us away, to prove that we're ashamed or that the rumors are true." "I hate seeing you so tired," Cassian said, "so worn down by their cruelty." "I'm not worn down," Melinda insisted, rising on her elbow to look at him. "I'm angry, and anger gives me strength." He smiled at that, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "My fierce Duchess." "Always," she promised, and sealed it with a kiss. The night of the Hartwell ball arrived with the weight of destiny. Melinda dressed in a gown of midnight blue silk, shot through with silver thread, a deliberate echo of the Stormholt colours. Her hair was dressed high, diamonds at her throat and ears, the Stormholt diamonds, centuries old and magnificent. Cassian, in black evening clothes with the silver wolf's headpin at his cravat, looked every inch the powerful duke he was. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "Ready," Melinda confirmed. The Hartwell ball was being held at the Dowager's Grosvenor Square mansion, a sprawling edifice ablaze with lights. They arrived early to take their places in the receiving line alongside the Dowager. "Remember," the Dowager murmured as the first guests began arriving, "you are the Duke and Duchess of Stormholt. You are above their petty gossip. Show them nothing but grace and unity." For the next 2 hours they greeted hundreds of guests. Melinda smiled until her face ached, exchanged pleasantries with people she knew were gossiping about them, and stood by Cassian's side with unwavering support. And then the Ashfords arrived. Lord Ashford came first, a portly man with cold eyes and a sneering mouth. His wife, the Lady Ashford, was thin and bitter-looking. Behind them came Charlotte with her husband, Sir Philip Barrett, and finally, Lady Sylvia. The Dowager greeted Lord Ashford with icy politeness. "Lord Ashford, Lady Ashford, how kind of you to attend." "We wouldn't miss it," Lord Ashford said, his gaze sliding to Cassian with unmistakable malice. "Your Grace," he added with the barest minimum of courtesy. "Lord Ashford," Cassian replied, his voice neutral. Charlotte stepped forward, her smile sharp as glass. "Your Grace," she said to Melinda, "what a beautiful gown. Though I suppose when one marries a duke, one can afford such luxuries." "When one marries the right duke," Melinda corrected pleasantly, "one discovers that true luxury lies not in gowns, but in the quality of one's husband." Charlotte's smile froze. Before she could respond, the Dowager intervened smoothly, directing the Ashfords away from the receiving line. "Well done," Cassian murmured when they were out of earshot, "though I fear you've made an enemy for life." "I made that enemy the moment I married you," Melinda replied. "I might as well enjoy it." When the receiving line finally ended and the dancing began, Cassian led Melinda onto the floor for the opening waltz. As they swept across the polished boards, Melinda was acutely aware of every eye upon them. "They're watching," she murmured. "Let them watch," Cassian replied, pulling her infinitesimally closer. "Let them see how deeply I love my wife." The waltz was perfect. They moved together as though they'd been dancing their entire lives. Melinda forgot the watching crowd, forgot the Ashfords and their poison, forgot everything except the man holding her and the love that bound them. When the dance ended, the applause was genuine and warm. They had passed the first test. The evening progressed without incident until supper was announced. The guests began making their way to the dining room, and Melinda found herself temporarily separated from Cassian by the crush of bodies. And that was when Lady Sylvia struck. She appeared at Melinda's elbow as though materializing from shadows. "Your Grace, might I have a word?" "I'm looking for my husband," Melinda said coolly. "This will only take a moment." Lady Sylvia's hand clamped around Melinda's arm with surprising strength, steering her toward a small antechamber. It concerns him, actually. Against her better judgment, Melinda allowed herself to be led into the chamber. The moment they were inside, Lady Sylvia closed the door. "What do you want?" Melinda demanded. "To help you," Lady Sylvia said, "though you're too stubborn to realize you need it." "I don't need or want your help." "Don't you?" Lady Sylvia pulled a folded paper from her reticule. "This is a letter, written by your husband to my sister, delivered the day before their wedding was to take place." Melinda's heart began to pound, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't believe you." "Read it." Lady Sylvia thrust the paper at her. "Read it, and see what kind of man you married." With trembling hands, Melinda unfolded the letter. The handwriting was masculine, the paper expensive. It began, "My dearest Charlotte." Melinda forced herself to read, her heart sinking with each line. The letter was passionate, professing deep love, promising eternal devotion. It was signed simply C. "You see?" Lady Sylvia's voice was poisonously sweet. "He loved my sister, truly loved her. Whatever he tells you about overheard conversations and broken trusts, it's lies. He loved Charlotte, and she was forced to reject him when she discovered certain things about his character." "This proves nothing," Melinda said, though the paper shook in her hands. "This could be a forgery. It's his handwriting. We've had it verified by an expert." Lady Sylvia moved closer, her green eyes glittering. "Your husband is a liar, Your Grace. He married you for convenience, probably for your father's political connections or some other calculated reason. He doesn't love you. He never could. His heart belongs to my sister." Melinda stared at the letter, her mind racing. The handwriting did look similar to Cassian's, but she couldn't be certain. And the contents, they contradicted everything Cassian had told her about his relationship with Charlotte. But could she trust her own judgment? She had only known Cassian for 3 months. The Ashfords had known him for years. "I don't believe you," Melinda repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. "Then ask him about the letter," Lady Sylvia suggested. "See how he responds. Watch his face when you confront him. And then you'll know the truth." She swept out of the antechamber, leaving Melinda alone with the letter and her suddenly shaken certainty. Melinda stood in the antechamber, the letter clutched in her trembling hands, her mind a chaos of conflicting thoughts. This could be a forgery. The Ashfords are liars. But what if it's real? What if Cassian has been deceiving me? "No," she whispered aloud. "No, I won't doubt him. I won't." But the poison had been planted. She could feel it working through her, insidious and dark. The door opened and Cassian appeared, his face tense with concern. "Melinda? I've been searching everywhere. What are you doing in here? Is something wrong?" Melinda looked at her husband, his handsome face, his worried eyes, and felt tears prick her lids. "Lady Sylvia gave me this," she said, holding out the letter. Cassian took it, his expression growing thunderous as he read. When he finished, he crumpled the paper in his fist. "It's a forgery," he said flatly. "A damned good one, I'll grant them, but a forgery nonetheless." "How can you be certain?" "Because I never wrote such drivel to Charlotte." Cassian's voice was harsh with frustration. "Melinda, I told you the truth about our relationship. It was tepid at best. I never professed grand passion because I never felt it. This letter," he gestured with the crumpled paper, "is either a complete fabrication or something they cobbled together from various correspondence. The handwriting can be forged, especially if they had access to actual letters from me." Cassian moved closer, taking her shoulders gently. "Melinda, look at me. Do you truly believe I would lie to you about something this important?" Melinda searched his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity and wounded pride. The doubt Lady Sylvia had planted began to wither. "No," she said softly. "I don't believe you'd lie to me." "Then believe me now. I don't love Charlotte. I never truly did. I love you, only you. This letter is a desperate attempt by the Ashfords to drive a wedge between us." His hands tightened on her shoulders. "Don't let them succeed." Melinda's remaining doubts crumbled. She threw her arms around her husband, burying her face against his chest. "I'm sorry. I should never have doubted even for a moment. You're human. Cassian said, stroking her hair, "and they're expert manipulators. But we won't give them the satisfaction of destroying our marriage. What do we do about the letter?" Cassian looked at the crumpled paper in his hand, his expression hardening. "We expose it for the lie it is, publicly, tonight." "How?" "Trust me." He took her hand. "Are you with me?" "Always," Melinda promised. They returned to the ballroom together, where the dancing had resumed. Cassian scanned the crowd until he spotted Lord Ashford speaking with a group of gentlemen near the card room. With deliberate purpose, he guided Melinda across the floor. "Lord Ashford," Cassian said, his voice carrying clearly, "I believe we need to have a discussion." The conversation around them died. Heads turned, sensing drama. Lord Ashford's florid face went pale, then flushed with anger. "I have nothing to say to you, Stormholt." "Pity, because I have quite a bit to say to you." Cassian held up the crumpled letter. "Your daughter gave this to my wife tonight, claiming it was a letter I wrote to Charlotte, professing eternal love." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Melinda could see Charlotte and Lady Sylvia pushing through the crush of guests, their faces masks of false innocence. "Is something amiss?" The Dowager Duchess appeared, her voice cutting through the whispers. "Lord Ashford's family has been spreading malicious lies about my marriage," Cassian said clearly. "Tonight they attempted to convince my wife that I'm still in love with his daughter by presenting her with this forged letter." "It's not forged," Charlotte's voice rang out. "You wrote that letter to me. You loved me." "I never wrote this letter," Cassian said coldly, "and I challenge anyone here to prove otherwise." "Lady Pemberton," he turned to the Countess, who had moved closer. "You pride yourself on your collection of correspondence. Have you letters from me?" Lady Pemberton looked flustered, but intrigued. "I have a few, Your Grace, from when you served on the hospital charity board with me." "Then compare them to this." Cassian handed her the crumpled paper. "Compare the handwriting, the style, the phrasing. Tell this assembly whether you believe they were written by the same person." Lady Pemberton smoothed out the letter, produced her spectacles and studied it intently. The ballroom had gone silent, everyone straining to hear her verdict. "The script is similar," she said finally, "but the phrasing is wrong. His Grace writes in a clear, concise manner. This," she gestured at the letter, "is overwrought and melodramatic, quite unlike his style." "It's still his handwriting," Lady Sylvia insisted. "Perhaps because it was traced or copied," suggested Lord Hartwell, who had joined the growing circle. "It's not difficult to forge a signature or even longer passages if one has enough samples." "This is ridiculous," Lord Ashford blustered. "The Duke is obviously lying to protect his reputation." "Am I?" Cassian's voice was dangerously soft. "Then explain to me, Lord Ashford, why you've spent 6 years spreading vicious rumors about me, why you've tried to poison society against me, why your family has made it their mission to destroy my reputation, and now my marriage. You humiliated my daughter. I ended a betrothal to a woman who didn't love me. That's not humiliation, that's self-preservation." Cassian looked around at the assembled guests. Lady Charlotte Ashford, now Lady Barrett, told her sister that she viewed me solely as a handsome object to display. She cared nothing for my character, my mind, my soul, only my face. When I discovered this, I ended the engagement. "Is that truly so unforgivable?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people were nodding, their expressions thoughtful. "You lie!" Charlotte pushed her way to the front, her face flushed with rage. "I loved you. I would have been a devoted wife. Then why, when I overheard you speaking with your sister, did you laugh at the very suggestion of love?" Cassian's voice was calm but implacable. "Why did you say, and I quote, 'Who cares about love when you can wake every morning to a face like a fallen angel?'" Charlotte paled. Around them, shocked whispers multiplied. "You're twisting my words." "Am I? Lady Sylvia?" Cassian turned to Charlotte's sister. "Were you present during that conversation?" Lady Sylvia's face had gone white. She said nothing. "I thought so." Cassian looked around at the crowd. "For 6 years I've endured whispers and speculation. I've been called beast, been accused of terrible deeds, been treated as though I'm monstrous, all because I refused to marry a woman who viewed me as property. And when I finally found happiness, when I married a woman who sees me for who I truly am, the Ashfords tried to destroy that too." He pulled Melinda close to his side. But they failed, because my wife knows my heart. She knows my character, and no forged letter, no malicious whisper can change that. The Dowager Duchess stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority. I have known Cassian Redwyke since he was in leading strings. He is a man of honor and integrity. The accusations made by the Ashford family are baseless and cruel. I will not have such people in my home. Agreed, said Lord Hartwell. The Ashfords should leave. Indeed, added Lady Pemberton, surprising everyone. I've tolerated their gossip long enough. It's clear now it was all lies. Lord Ashford looked around wildly, seeing support evaporate. You can't do this. We're one of the oldest families in England. Then you should have behaved with the honor that position demands, the Dowager said coldly. Leave, now, and consider yourselves unwelcome in polite society until you make proper amends to the Duke and Duchess of Stormholt. Security of the household began moving toward the Ashfords. Lord Ashford, seeing he was defeated, grabbed his wife's arm. Charlotte was crying. Lady Sylvia looked murderous, but they had no choice. They retreated from the ballroom under the cold stares of London's elite. As they disappeared, the tension in the room broke. Conversation resumed, louder now, everyone discussing the dramatic confrontation they'd just witnessed. The Dowager approached Cassian and Melinda, her expression approving. Well done, my boy. Sometimes the only way to kill a snake is to cut off its head. Thank you, godmother, Cassian said quietly. Don't thank me. Thank your remarkable wife. The Dowager smiled at Melinda. You stood by him when it would have been easier to doubt. That takes strength of character. As the Dowager moved away to calm her other guests, Cassian turned to Melinda. Are you all right? I should be asking you that, Melinda replied. That was intense. It was necessary. Cassian cupped her face in his hands. I'm sorry you were dragged into my past. Sorry you had to endure their poison. I'm not sorry, Melinda said firmly. I'm proud to be your wife, proud of how you handled them. I couldn't have done it without you. He kissed her softly, unmindful of the watching crowd. You're my strength, Melinda, my salvation. And you're mine, she whispered back. The aftermath of the Hartwell ball was swift and decisive. By morning, all of London knew what had transpired. The Ashfords had been exposed as liars and manipulators, and society, ever fickle, turned against them with the same enthusiasm they had once directed at Cassian. Lady Pemberton, of all people, became an unlikely ally. She called upon Melinda 2 days after the ball, bringing with her several other influential society matrons. We owe you an apology, Your Grace, Lady Pemberton said without preamble. We believed the Ashfords' lies. We participated in spreading gossip about your husband. It was wrong and we're sorry. Melinda, still learning to navigate the complex politics of the ton, considered her response carefully. She could reject the apology, take petty revenge for the months of whispers and judgment, or she could take the higher road. Apology accepted, she said graciously. We all make mistakes. What matters is how we move forward. The relief on the women's faces was palpable. Within a week, invitations to Stormholt House began flowing in. Requests for the Duke and Duchess to attend dinners, musicales, even intimate family gatherings. Society, having ostracized Cassian for years, now wanted to welcome him back into the fold. Cassian was bemused by the sudden shift. 6 years ago, these same people whispered that I was cursed, he observed one evening as they dressed for yet another dinner party. Now they want to be my dearest friends. That's society, Melinda said, adjusting his cravat. Fickle and shallow, but it's also our world, at least for now. Do you want to stay in London? Cassian asked. Or would you prefer to retreat to Stormholt Abbey? We don't have to keep doing this. Melinda considered. The prospect of leaving London society behind was tempting. She had never particularly enjoyed the constant socializing, the endless scrutiny. But she also recognized the importance of solidifying their position now, while they had momentum. Let's stay for the rest of the season, she said. Establish ourselves properly, then we can retreat to the country and live quietly. The country, Cassian repeated wistfully. I haven't been to Stormholt Abbey in over a year. It's the family seat, a beautiful place in Devon. Rolling hills, forests, the sea just a few miles away. It sounds lovely. Melinda finished with his cravat and stepped back to admire her handiwork. We'll go there when the season ends. Just the two of us. Just the two of us, Cassian agreed, pulling her close. though hopefully not for much longer. Melinda looked up at him, puzzled. What do you mean? I mean, he placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. I'm hoping that by the time we reach Devon, there might be 3 of us. Melinda's breath caught. She had been so caught up in the drama with the Ashfords, so focused on protecting their marriage, that she hadn't paid attention to the subtle signs her body had been sending. But now that Cassian mentioned it, I'm late, she said slowly. Nearly 2 weeks late. I know. Cassian's eyes were alight with hope. I've been counting the days. But I didn't want to say anything in case I was wrong, in case it caused disappointment. Melinda placed her hand over his, her own hope blooming bright and fierce. Do you think? I think we should wait a few more weeks to be certain, Cassian said practically, though his voice shook slightly. But yes, my love, I think you might be carrying our child. The possibility, no, the probability, filled Melinda with a joy so intense it brought tears to her eyes. A child, their child, the ultimate proof of their love and unity. If it's true, she whispered, if I'm truly with child, then the Ashfords have lost completely. They tried to poison our love, to destroy our marriage. But instead, we've created new life. Justice, Cassian murmured, kissing her forehead. And more than that, happiness. Real, genuine happiness. The remaining weeks of the season passed in a blur of social obligations and quiet domesticity. Melinda's courses continued to stay away, and other signs appeared. Tenderness in her breasts, a slight queasiness in the mornings, an overwhelming fatigue that struck in the afternoons. She consulted a physician in secret, not wanting to raise hopes if she was mistaken. But the doctor confirmed what she already knew in her heart. She was approximately 6 weeks pregnant, and if all went well, would deliver sometime in late January or early February. Melinda chose to tell Cassian on their 4-month wedding anniversary. She waited until after dinner, when they were alone in the library, that same room where so much of their story had unfolded. I have something to tell you, she said, her heart hammering with excitement and nerves. Cassian looked up from the book he'd been reading, immediately alert to her tone. What is it? I saw a physician yesterday. He confirmed it. We're going to have a child. In February. For a moment, Cassian simply stared at her. Then his face broke into the most radiant smile Melinda had ever seen. He crossed the room in 2 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around with a whoop of joy. Careful, Melinda laughed, clinging to him. You'll make me dizzy. I don't care, we're having a baby. Cassian set her down gently, then immediately looked concerned. Are you well? Should you be standing? Do you need to sit down? What did the physician say? The physician said I'm perfectly healthy, and the pregnancy is progressing normally, Melinda assured him, touched by his concern. I'm not an invalid, Cassian. I can continue normal activities. But you must be careful. I will be careful, Melinda promised. But I won't spend the next 8 months wrapped in cotton wool. Cassian pulled her close, his hand splaying across her still flat stomach. Our child, he murmured wonderingly. Melinda, you've given me everything. Love, hope, redemption, and now this. How did I become so fortunate? We're both fortunate, Melinda replied. We found each other despite everything, despite our wounds and fears and the obstacles placed in our path. That's not fortune, that's fate. Then I'm grateful to fate, Cassian said, and kissed her with such tenderness that Melinda felt tears prick her eyes. They decided to keep the pregnancy quiet for a few more weeks, until Melinda was safely past the dangerous early months. Only the household staff at Stormholt House knew, and they could be trusted with discretion. As July melted into August, Melinda and Cassian attended fewer social functions, claiming the summer heat as an excuse. In truth, they were beginning to withdraw from London society, preparing for their retreat to Stormholt Abbey. But before they could leave, one final confrontation awaited them. The encounter happened at the theatre of all places. Melinda and Cassian had gone to see a new comedy at Drury Lane, enjoying what would likely be their last theatrical performance before departing for Devon. During the interval, as they strolled through the theatre's grand foyer, they came face to face with Charlotte Barrett. Charlotte was alone, her husband apparently having stepped out. She looked thinner than when Melinda had last seen her, with shadows under her eyes and a brittleness to her expression. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Charlotte said quietly, "Your Grace, Your Grace." "Lady Barrett," Cassian replied neutrally. Charlotte looked at him with something that might have been regret. "I owe you both an apology," she said, "for what my family did, for my part in it." Melinda glanced at Cassian, seeing her own surprise reflected in his face. "Go on," Cassian said guardedly. "I was young and foolish when we were betrothed," Charlotte continued. "I did view you as a prize to be won. I'm ashamed of that now. You deserved better than my shallow affection." "Yes, I did," Cassian agreed bluntly, "but that doesn't excuse your family's campaign of lies." "I know, and I tried to stop them. Truly I did. But my father, he was so angry about the broken engagement, about the scandal. He wouldn't listen." Charlotte's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "He's ruined now, you know. After that night at the Hartwell ball, society turned against us. His business ventures have collapsed. Sylvia can't find a husband. No one will have her. Even my own marriage is strained because Philip is tired of being associated with my family's disgrace." "I don't feel sorry for them," Melinda said coldly. "They brought it upon themselves." "I know." Charlotte looked at her directly. "You were right to defend your husband. I wish I had possessed your courage and integrity when I had the chance." "Why are you telling us this?" Cassian asked. "Because I wanted you to know that not all of us are monsters. I made terrible mistakes, but I never wanted things to go so far." Charlotte straightened her shoulders. "I'm leaving London. Philip has accepted a position in the north. We'll be gone by the end of the month. Before I left, I wanted to make what amends I could." Melinda studied the other woman, searching for signs of deception or manipulation. But Charlotte's expression was open, her regret seemingly genuine. "Thank you for the apology," Melinda said finally. "I hope you find peace in your new life." Charlotte nodded, tears spilling over. "And I hope you both find happiness. From what I've seen, you already have." She curtsied and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Cassian watched her go, his expression thoughtful. "Do you think she was sincere?" "I think she's realized too late the consequences of her actions," Melinda replied. "Whether that constitutes real repentance or just self-pity, I'm not certain. But it doesn't matter. She's leaving London. The Ashfords are broken, and we—" she placed his hand on her stomach, "are beginning our real life together." Cassian smiled, the shadows that had haunted his eyes for so long finally lifting. "Our real life," he echoed. "I liked the sound of that." They departed for Stormholt Abbey 3 days later, leaving behind the stifling heat of London and the memories of the season's drama. The journey took 2 days, travelling in comfortable stages with overnight stops at coaching inns. Melinda dozed through much of the journey, fatigue from the pregnancy making her drowsy. Cassian watched over her tenderly, ensuring she was comfortable, bringing her water and light meals when they stopped. "You're going to be an insufferably overprotective father," Melinda observed at one point, watching him fuss with the carriage cushions. "Absolutely," Cassian agreed without shame. "I'm going to spoil our child abominably." "1 child won't be enough," Melinda mused. "I'm thinking at least 4. "4?" Cassian looked startled, then pleased. "I'm amenable to that, though perhaps we should see how this one goes first." They arrived at Stormholt Abbey in the golden light of late afternoon. The estate was everything Cassian had promised, a magnificent Elizabethan manor house set in rolling parkland, with ancient forests beyond, and the shimmer of the sea visible in the distance. "It's beautiful," Melinda breathed, as the carriage rolled up the sweeping drive. "Wait until you see the inside," Cassian said, looking boyish with excitement. "And the gardens. My mother's gardens were famous throughout Devon." The interior of Stormholt Abbey was as impressive as its exterior. Vaulted ceilings, magnificent plasterwork, family portraits dating back centuries. But there was also a warmth to it that Stormholt House in London had lacked. This was clearly a home, not just a showplace. The housekeeper, Mrs. Thornton, sister to the London butler as it turned out, greeted them warmly. "Welcome home, Your Grace. Your Grace. It's wonderful to have the Abbey full of life again." "It's good to be here, Mrs. Thornton," Cassian said. "Please show her Grace to the Duchess's apartments. She's tired from the journey." "Of course, Your Grace. Right this way." The Duchess's apartments at Stormholt Abbey were more personal than those in London, lighter, airier, with views over the gardens and parkland. Melinda sank onto the window seat, gazing out at her new domain. "What do you think?" Cassian asked, coming to sit beside her. "I think we're home," Melinda replied simply. That night they dined alone in the small family dining room, attended by only a few servants. After months of performing for London society, the privacy felt luxurious. "What shall we do with all this freedom?" Melinda asked over dessert. "Everything," Cassian replied. "Ride through the estate, walk along the cliffs, read in the library, sleep late, make love in the afternoon." He grinned wickedly. "All the things we couldn't do in London." "Sounds perfect," Melinda said. And it was. The months at Stormholt Abbey passed in peaceful contentment. Melinda's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her belly growing round as autumn painted the Devon countryside in shades of gold and crimson. Cassian was indeed an insufferably attentive husband. He insisted Melinda rest frequently, brought her books and tea, accompanied her on gentle walks through the gardens, and spent his evenings reading to her or playing the pianoforte while she embroidered baby clothes. "I'm not made of glass," Melinda protested one afternoon when Cassian objected to her riding. "No, but you're carrying our child," Cassian replied firmly. "Humour me, Melinda. Let me take care of you." And Melinda, who had spent most of her life taking care of herself, learning to navigate society's treacherous waters alone, found herself surrendering to the luxury of being cherished. They received few visitors at Stormholt Abbey, which suited them both perfectly. The Dowager Duchess came for a week in October, ostensibly to check on their welfare, but really, Melinda suspected, to ensure Cassian was treating his pregnant wife properly. "He's being wonderful," Melinda assured her over tea in the morning room. "Perhaps a bit overprotective, but I can't fault his devotion." "Good," the Dowager said with satisfaction. "I knew you'd be perfect for him. He needed someone strong, someone who wouldn't be cowed by society's judgment or his own wounds." "He's healed considerably," Melinda observed. "He smiles more now, laughs freely. The darkness that used to shadow him has lifted." "Love does that," the Dowager said simply. "Real love, not the shallow infatuation that so many mistake for the genuine article." Word of Melinda's pregnancy had spread through the ton, of course. Letters of congratulation arrived from surprising sources. Lady Pemberton sent a beautiful christening gown, Lord Hartwell an antique rattle that had been in his family for generations. Even some of the young ladies who had once pursued Cassian sent awkward but well-meaning notes. The Ashfords sent nothing, which was a relief. According to the Dowager's reports, Lord Ashford's fortunes had indeed collapsed completely. The family had retreated to a small estate in the north, effectively exiled from London society. Charlotte and Sir Philip had moved to Yorkshire. Lady Sylvia remained unmarried, and by all accounts, bitter. "I should feel sorry for them," Melinda said when the Dowager related this news, "but I can't quite manage it." "Nor should you," the Dowager replied tartly. "They brought their troubles upon themselves through malice and lies. Let them live with the consequences." As Melinda's pregnancy advanced into the final months, they began preparing the nursery. Cassian threw himself into the project with enthusiasm, personally overseeing every detail, from the pale yellow paint on the walls to the carved wooden cradle that had rocked Stormholt infants for generations. "Boy or girl, do you think?" he asked one evening, as they stood in the finished nursery admiring their work. "I don't know," Melinda replied, resting her hands on her enormous belly. "But healthy, that's all I care about." "Healthy," Cassian agreed, kneeling to press a kiss to her stomach. "And loved. So very loved." Christmas came, and with it the first snow. Melinda and Cassian celebrated quietly, just the two of them, exchanging simple gifts and watching the snow fall over the parkland. "This is our last Christmas as just a couple," Cassian observed, holding Melinda close before the drawing-room fire. "Next year, there will be 3 of us." "4 of us," Melinda corrected. "Mrs. Thornton tells me you were absolute terror as a toddler, always into everything. We'll definitely need to hire a proper nurse." Cassian laughed. "I wasn't that bad. You once climbed onto the roof at age 3 and had to be coaxed down by the head gardener. How does Mrs. Thornton even remember that?" "She has an excellent memory for your childhood misdeeds," Melinda said dryly. "I'm compiling a list for our child. Someday they'll need to know what they're genetically predisposed to." "What about your childhood misdeeds?" Cassian challenged. "I was a perfect angel," Melinda claimed with a straight face. "Liar," Cassian said affectionately, and kissed her. January arrived with bitter cold and clear skies. Melinda's time was drawing near. The physician estimated she would deliver within the next few weeks. A midwife from the village, Mrs. Hartley, had been engaged and was standing ready. On a cold night in late January, as a storm howled outside the Abbey's ancient walls, Melinda's labor began. It started as a dull ache in her back during dinner. By the time they retired to their chambers, the pains had intensified into regular contractions. Cassian, who had been relatively calm throughout the pregnancy, immediately panicked. "I'll send for the midwife," he said, already heading for the door. "And the physician, and Mrs. Thornton—" "Cassian," Melinda's calm voice stopped him. "The midwife has been staying in the Abbey for the past week, remember? She's in the East Wing, and my labor has only just begun. First babies take time." "How can you be so calm?" Cassian demanded, returning to her side. "You're in pain." "I'm in labor," Melinda corrected. "It's supposed to hurt. Now please fetch Mrs. Hartley and then try not to worry yourself into an early grave." The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Mrs. Hartley proved competent and reassuring, guiding Melinda through the contractions with practiced ease. Cassian stayed by her side, despite the midwife's suggestions that he might prefer to wait elsewhere, a highly unusual choice for an aristocratic husband. "I'm not leaving," he said firmly, holding Melinda's hand. "I'm staying right here." And he did, through all the long hours of labor, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement, letting her squeeze his hand until his bones ached. He didn't flinch when she cursed him for getting her pregnant in the first place, and he didn't complain when she nearly broke his fingers during a particularly intense contraction. Dawn was breaking over the Devon hills when Melinda gave one final, tremendous push, and their child entered the world with a robust cry. "Her son, Your Grace," Mrs. Hartley announced, quickly cleaning the baby and wrapping him in soft blankets. "A healthy, perfect son." Melinda collapsed against the pillows, exhausted but euphoric. Cassian was crying, openly weeping, as Mrs. Hartley placed the tiny bundle in his arms. "A son," he whispered reverently, staring down at the red, squalling infant. "Melinda, we have a son." "Let me see him," Melinda said, reaching out. Cassian brought the baby to her, and Melinda looked upon her child for the first time. He had a shock of dark hair, slate-blue eyes that would probably turn brown like his parents, and a healthy set of lungs that he was using to voice his displeasure at being ejected from his comfortable home. "Hello, little one," Melinda murmured, touching his tiny fist. Immediately the baby's fingers curled around hers, gripping tight. "Welcome to the world." "What shall we name him?" Cassian asked, unable to tear his eyes from his son. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their child, Melinda knew exactly what his name should be. "William," she said. "William Alexander Redwyke, after your father and mine." Cassian looked up, surprise and pleasure on his face. "Are you certain? I know you weren't particularly close to your father. He may have made mistakes, but he's still my father, and despite everything, he gave me you." Melinda smiled tiredly. "William Alexander it is." "William Alexander Redwyke," Cassian repeated, testing the name. "Master William, for now, and someday, the 9th Duke of Stormholt." He leaned down to kiss Melinda's forehead. "Thank you. Thank you for him. For this. For everything." "Thank you for being here," Melinda replied. "For staying with me." "Always," Cassian promised. "I'll always stay." The weeks following William's birth were a haze of exhaustion and overwhelming love. Melinda discovered that while she adored her son, being a new mother was far more challenging than she had anticipated. William had strong opinions about everything, when he wanted to eat, when he wanted to sleep, when he wanted to be held. And he expressed these opinions loudly. Cassian was besotted. He spent hours simply watching William sleep, marveling at each tiny yawn and stretch. He learned to change nappies with surprising competence, and could soothe the baby's fussing with a practiced bounce and gentle hum. "You're a natural father," Melinda observed one night, watching Cassian pace the nursery with a crying William. "I'm determined not to be like my own parents," Cassian replied. "William will never be just a pretty face to me. He'll be valued for his character, his mind, his heart." "He's lucky to have you," Melinda said softly. "We're both lucky to have you," Cassian corrected, finally getting William to settle. He placed the now sleeping baby in his cradle with exquisite care. "You're an extraordinary mother, Melinda, and an extraordinary woman." They stood together, watching their son sleep, and Melinda felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This was what she had always wanted, even when she hadn't known to want it. A family built on love, not obligation. A husband who cherished her. A child who would grow up knowing he was valued for who he was, not what he looked like. "We did it," she whispered. "Despite everything, my family's debts, your wounds, the Ashfords' lies, we built something real, something beautiful." "We did," Cassian agreed, pulling her close. "And this is only the beginning." Spring came to Stormholt Abbey, transforming the gardens into a riot of colour. William, now 3 months old, was developing rapidly, smiling at his parents, grasping at toys, becoming more alert and responsive each day. Melinda had regained her strength and figure, though she found herself changed in more fundamental ways. Motherhood had awakened something fierce and protective in her, a willingness to defend her family against any threat. She suspected she would never again be the quietly obedient daughter she had been before her marriage. "You've grown fierce," Cassian observed one afternoon as they walked through the gardens. William nestled in his father's arms. "I like it. Motherhood will do that," Melinda replied, "though I was fairly fierce at the Hartwell ball, if you recall." "True. You were magnificent." Cassian smiled down at his son. "William, your mother is a warrior queen. Never forget that." William, who was more interested in trying to grab his father's cravat, gurgled happily. They had received word from London that society had moved on to new scandals. The Stormholts were now simply another aristocratic family, respected, established, no longer the subject of gossip. The Ashfords were all but forgotten, their brief campaign of revenge a cautionary tale about the dangers of malice. "Do you think we'll ever return to London?" Melinda asked. "Eventually," Cassian said. "William will need to be presented to society someday. And I do have a seat in the House of Lords that I've been neglecting, but not yet, not for a good long while." "Good," Melinda said with satisfaction. "I'm quite content here." They had visitors occasionally. The Dowager came for Easter, bringing gifts for William and approval for how the young family was managing. A few of Cassian's friends from his university days called, curious to meet the wife and child who had transformed the notorious beast of Stormholt into a contented family man. But mostly they were alone, building their life in peaceful isolation. One evening in late spring, after William had been put to bed and they were relaxing in the library, Cassian suddenly said, "I want to thank you." Melinda looked up from her book. "For what?" "For saving me," Cassian said simply. "For seeing past the fears and wounds, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself, for giving me a family, a real family built on love." "You didn't just marry me, Melinda, you redeemed me." "That's nonsense," Melinda said firmly. "You saved yourself, Cassian. You chose to stop hiding. You chose to trust me. You chose to confront the Ashfords instead of letting their lies continue. I was just there to support you." "You were there to love me," Cassian corrected, "and that made all the difference." He crossed to her, pulling her up from her chair and into his arms. "I love you, Melinda Redwyke. I loved you when you were my terrified bride. I loved you when you defended me at the Hartwell ball. I loved you when you gave birth to our son. And I'll love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Melinda whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "My beautiful beast. My perfectly imperfect husband." "I'm not a beast anymore," Cassian said with a smile. "No," Melinda agreed. "You're just a man, a good man, the best man I know." They kissed, deep and lingering, tasting of love and contentment and hope for the future. From the nursery upstairs came the sound of William beginning to fuss, wanting his evening feeding. Melinda laughed against Cassian's lips. "Duty calls," she said. "Let me get him," Cassian offered. "You've been with him all day." "We'll go together," Melinda decided, taking his hand. And they did, climbing the stairs to the nursery where their son waited, walking into their future hand in hand. 5 years later, the gardens at Stormholt Abbey rang with children's laughter. William, now 5 years old and the very image of his father, raced across the lawn pursued by his younger brother Edmund, age 3, and their baby sister Catherine, who at 18 months was just learning to toddle. Careful, Melinda called from where she sat on a blanket under an ancient oak tree, her hand resting on her swollen belly. She was pregnant again, their fourth child due in the autumn. Don't run too far. We won't, Mama, William called back, ever the responsible eldest child. Cassian emerged from the house carrying his wife before lowering himself to the blanket with a groan. I'm getting too old for 3 children, he complained good-naturedly. 4 might actually kill me. You're not even 40, Melinda pointed out, and you love every minute of it. I do, Cassian admitted, watching their children play with undisguised adoration, though I still say we should stop at 4. We said that after Edmund, Melinda reminded him, and yet here's Catherine, and another on the way. You're the one who wanted 4 children, Cassian said, then paused. This is the 4th, we're stopping now, yes? Probably, Melinda said vaguely, which made Cassian laugh. Catherine toddled over, demanding to be picked up by her father. Cassian obliged, settling the dark-haired little girl on his lap. She had Melinda's eyes and Cassian's dramatic features. Already, at not quite 2, she was showing signs of being a beauty. Not that looks matter, Cassian had said firmly when people commented on Catherine's prettiness. She'll be valued for her mind and character, just like her brothers. They had kept that promise with all their children. William was being educated not just in the traditional subjects expected of a future duke, but also in kindness, integrity, and the importance of seeing beyond surface appearances. Edmund showed signs of becoming a scholar, fascinated by books and natural philosophy, and Catherine, though still very young, was already demonstrating a fierce independence that reminded Melinda of herself. Do you ever regret it? Cassian asked suddenly. The marriage, I mean. Coming to Stormholt as my frightened bride? Melinda looked at her husband, older now with threads of silver in his dark hair, but still devastatingly handsome. More importantly, he was happy. Truly, deeply happy, in a way she suspected he had never been before their marriage. Not for a single moment, she said truthfully. You? How could I regret the greatest blessing of my life? Cassian leaned over to kiss her, careful of her pregnant belly. You gave me everything, Melinda. Love, family, redemption, purpose. You saw past the beast and found the man. There never was a beast, Melinda corrected gently, a conversation they'd had many times over the years. Just a wounded man who needed to be loved. From across the garden, William called out, Papa, come play with us. Duty calls, Cassian said with a smile, carefully setting Catherine down and hauling himself to his feet. He extended a hand to help Melinda up. Come on, my love. Let's go be chased by our feral offspring. They're not feral, Melinda protested, laughing. Merely enthusiastic. As they walked across the lawn toward their playing children, Melinda reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had entered Stormholt House 5 years ago, prepared to be broken, expecting a monster. Instead, she had found a partner, a lover, a friend. She had found home. The beast of Stormholt had turned out to be no beast at all, just a man who needed to be seen, truly seen, for who he really was. And in seeing him, in loving him, Melinda had found herself as well. Behind them, Stormholt Abbey stood solid and welcoming, its ancient stones warmed by the late spring sun. Inside those walls they had built a life of love and laughter, of messy dinners and louder bedtimes, of passionate nights and peaceful mornings. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. And as Cassian swept Catherine into his arms while William and Edmund demanded attention, as Melinda laughed and tried to prevent Edmund from putting a worm down his brother's shirt, she thought, This is happiness. This is what happily ever after really looks like. Not perfect, not always easy, but filled with love and built to last. The beast and his beauty, together forever, exactly as it should be. The end. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end. We hope this story moved you as deeply as it moved us to create it. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Your heartfelt support encourages us, from the bottom of our hearts, to keep writing more stories full of love, redemption, and unexpected twists. And don't miss what's next. At the end of the video, another hand-picked story will appear. Click it and be swept away by another emotional tale just like this one. Thank you for being here. The Legends of the Fall Team.